but I tell you, the people that are the most emails that I get from my YouTube channel are the people into psychedelics and the people into
Okay.
the occult and the people into the
Interesting.
new age. Because there's a sense, especially with the psychedelics, of again, the self pride is you really can't listen to somebody who hasn't done it. It's like somebody who's never had sex telling you about how bad sex is, and you've had sex, and you're like, well, no, sex isn't. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't. Why would I
Yeah.
listen to you? And that's how it is with psychedelics too, good or bad.
Right.
And so it takes somebody who's, oh yeah, I've done all that. Yeah, I've done that. Oh, you don't believe me? Well, here's a whole YouTube channel. Here's a whole life, a previous life I've lived, talking about
Right.
all that stuff. And so then it's like, well, people can listen up. They may not agree at first, but then they see the consistency and the depth of conversation that I'm trying to bring about. Whether you want to talk about Jungian synchronicities, Jungian understandings of archetype, and how that relates then to the logos, Christ, the Word, the incarnation. Again, tying in Jordan Peter, you can. For me, it's like all this stuff. I can speak to all this stuff because Orthodoxy is the truth, and so then the truth resonates at every single level, whether it's literal, whether it's metaphorical, allegorical,
Right.
archetypal. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. And that's something that your regular Pentecostal pastor can't do. And I don't know if you're on TikTok, man, but the only reason I'm on TikTok is to build the YouTube channel, the
Mm-hmm.
podcast, and it's really helped.
Yeah,
But
it's the only place for organic growth. All the other algorithms, I mean, TikTok's really degenerate and it's a psychological
of
weapon,
course, of
obviously.
course,
But at the
and a
same time, I'm
governmental
on
weapon.
TikTok. I just started a
Oh, you
TikTok.
did? Nice.
Yeah, because what I mean, if you're making content,
Yeah.
not being on it isn't the solution. For me,
No.
and the way that the work that I'm trying to do for Christ, I feel like that's what my job is. My job is
Mhm.
to like have one foot in the mud, like in the world. I'm not a
Oh yeah.
monastic. I am trying to speak to regular people, and especially young men. So it's like, well, where else am I going to do that other than TikTok? You got to get on there.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. It's funny. I was thinking the other day. Joe Rogan's fan base. I mean, when we started listening to Joe Rogan, we were in our 20s, right?
Oh yeah,
He was 40. You know what I mean? It's like it's weird. It's like you when you grow up, you kind of want like older men to like admire you, be like, "Hey, look, like I got my shit together."
right,
I'm one of you, and it's kind of like you're never gonna get that,
right.
and then you only get it from like the younger people. Like I realized that when I was coaching wrestling, it's like those kids admired me, and I was like, "Oh, wow, they actually admire me for all the traits I thought I had that I don't
Right.
get admiration from older men or whatever that you try to win over." So it's like it's funny how people find you, and you didn't know that was the group that you were talking to or you were meant to
Right.
inspire. But I was on
Right.
TikTok and I came across this Pentecostal pastor, man, and he was like speaking in tongues and and performing, you know,
Right.
on TikTok, and I was like, wow. I was like, you know what? Thank God for TikTok because it's going to expose this interpretation of Christianity as
Mhm.
bogus in some ways.
In other ways,
And it can be edifying.
as a scholar of religion, the fastest growing form of Christianity is Pentecostalism. So obviously, there's
Really?
Mormonism, which is ironically growing quite well.
Yeah.
Um, and then the fastest denomination, more so than Catholicism, more so than Orthodoxy, and it has to do with Pentecostals moving into places like Central America, South America,
Right.
Africa, and
That makes sense.
blending the charismatic attributes of the Pentecostal spirituality with traditional forms of magic and folk religion.
Mm.
And so, because they're doing that, Pentecostalism is absolutely spreading like wildfire across like Africa and South America, stuff like that.
Wow. That's fascinating, man. Because I remember in my Pentecostal church, they would do missions to India. India was the spot where they would
Yep.
go.
And that's where they want the more mystical the culture, the more susceptible people to are taking a liking to Pentecostalism because this idea of they claim being possessed by the spirit. Obviously, I don't agree with that analysis. Um, Places that are do that are going to be way more welcoming to that, and some people may get like that flavor a little bit better.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating thing. I mean, every Sunday people were speaking in tongues. My pastor was speaking in tongues every Sunday. So it's a very common thing for me. And when you
Hmm.
when you say that to somebody,
Excuse
they're
me.
like, "Wow, okay, this guy's crazy." Like he grew up in a cult, and it's like, yeah, in a way, yeah, I did grow up in a cult. I mean, I
Mm,
really do look at the Pentecostal church as a cult.
yeah.
Um, and but it's kind of like if you had a horrible basketball coach, right? Who just made basketball hell, right? And you're like, I fucking hate basketball. Basketball's the devil. Like I'm never playing basketball again. And it's like, is it basketball or was it the coach?
Right.
You know what I mean? So a lot of people, I find that within the Pentecostal church and a lot of evangelical denominations, they leave that because of that bad experience, and they shun it for 10, 15 years until they have kids, and they're like, you know what? My kids are amazing. I thank God every day. You know what? I do believe in God. It's like,
Right.
man, like you didn't have to lose 15 years of your spiritual growth. There's
Yeah.
there's
I do
another
think.
way of perceiving your relationship with God.
Yeah. I and you would be able to speak to this better than I can, but at least in my life, it's been funny that I do not force Christianity or Orthodoxy on all the my friends or the people generally around me day to day.
Yeah.
Um, but my friends who have had kids, and specifically the mothers, way way more likely to adopt Christianity and become seekers, like actually
Yeah.
reading, learning, investigating. Now that's also happened for some of the guys I know, and maybe even opening themselves up to Orthodoxy or become a little bit more interested. But in regards to the close sphere of my own circle, multiple of my buddies who are sort of new age in the same place I was at, and that's why we were all friends and stuff like that. Their wives, as they've got married and now have kids, become overt Christians, get baptized in maybe a Protestant church, but they're going deeper. They're on their own journey, and that's the thing: is the quest is like you have to actually have the desire to like know what is true, whether you are a believer now or not. Maybe you're into Buddhism, but it's literally wanting to know what's true and then doing the hard work.
Yeah.
Whatever the work is that you think you have to do, well, then do it so then you can get to the next point and see the next stepping stone, see the next place. And for me, that eventually led back to Orthodoxy. And that's what's been so interesting because I do one-on-ones is the depth of experience. Almost everybody I've talked to that as adults that have converted to Orthodoxy, whether it be that they were magicians, overt ritualistic magicians,
Yeah.
witchcraft, whether they were psychonauts like myself, whether they spent 3 years in Tibet or whatever they did, lived in India, that everybody um, has a sort of depth to it. And then there's other people that are just like born Christian, Protestant, or whatever, and they've just pursued Christ more and more and more. And now they're 25 and they've figured out church history and theology. Now they know all about Orthodoxy. And so then there's another person, but you still, there's so much depth to even that person. They don't have
Yeah.
tons of life experience per se, but their knowledge of faith and Christ, it is very extraordinary for their age. And so I found within Orthodoxy, it definitely attracts an individual with depth, who wants to take that whole journey on. And that I think has been really interesting and a characteristic that I've really yet to see fail in regards to people that are really taking it all to their heart.